Brandon Crane, thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. You portrayed the character of Ben Hanscom in the first adaptation of Stephen King's It back in 1990.
Ben! Ben! Hi, Ben!
But before we get into that, how did you get into acting?
I'll make a long story short. My grandfather was an actor.
Okay.
He was in Gone with the Wind. I mean, he goes way back.
Wow.
And yeah. He goes way back. So he knew a bunch of people in the industry, and I think they were having a party in like early 1980. I was like about four. And there was a lady there who thought I was cute and precocious and thought I would make a killing in commercials. And that was that. I mean, she set me up with an agent, and I think within a week I was out on an audition for a Skippy peanut butter commercial, and I got that. And that was it. I mean, I did that exclusively for a really long time.
Okay.
So yeah, it all got started when I was very young.
All right. And the part of Ben Hanscom, how did that come about?
So that was, your typical, the notice goes out and the agents see it and they submit you for it. But the funny thing is, I had read the book about 6 months before, and I really connected with the character, like the way I've never connected with anything else. Because I always did like pratfalls and fat jokes, or I was always eating. I was like token fat kid number 3, right? So, and they were just making a lot of Stephen King movies around that time. So I thought, oh my God, if they ever do this, in almost every way, I'm Ben Hanscom. So I want this. Lo and behold, a few months later, get the call to audition. And I remember it being pretty protracted. Like the audition process took a really long time because I think they were being very, very deliberate with the casting. But every time, I mean, when I walked out of that first audition feeling like I've got this, it was the best audition of my life.
Yeah.
And as is often the case, you can walk away from an audition feeling that way and still not get it because it's not up to you. It has nothing to do with you. You could give the best line readings in the world. If the casting people or the director just doesn't see it, he's just not going to see it.
Yeah. So
did a few callbacks, and I honestly felt like I'd lost the role at least 3 times. And then so we were doing a chemistry read where they brought in maybe 20 or so kids, and they put us together in groups, and they put us in the room together on camera to see how well we interact with each other. And I didn't see any other Ben Hanscoms.
Okay.
Right. So yeah. So and if that doesn't go to your head, right? So I did something you never do. And I asked the session runner, the guy who's kind of helping shuffle people in and out, keeping track of everybody. I said, where are the other Bens? And he said, they're looking at a kid in Texas. I think a couple in Vancouver, but we're pretty sure it's you. Right. You never hear that from anyone. So I walked out of there going, oh my God, I got this. And then again, nothing. And then we got the call that I got the job, and we were starting in a week.
Okay. Geez,
yeah, it was like that.
Pretty quick. Yeah.
I think this went on for at least a month. At least a month. But I'm so thankful it worked out.
Well, yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and it was such a great cast. I mean, you had Jonathan Brandis, Emily Perkins. I mean, Seth Green was there. How did you guys get on? Did you guys get on well? Because you shot in Vancouver.
We did.
Yeah.
So Ben Heller and Emily Perkins, and Jared Blankard, who was Henry Bauer. Yeah. They had the home turf advantage because that's where they were from.
Yes.
But we all got along really, really well. I mean, you'll have your squibbles or squabbles every once in a while.
Yeah.
Because we're working every day of the week and we're together constantly. We're going to start, getting at each other. I mean, like Jonathan Brandis, for example, was an absolute savage when it came to mom jokes, which is one of the things I appreciated the most of about the 2017 film.
Yeah.
Because those kids were us. It took place in the same time that we were shooting our version, and I really felt a connection with those characters. It was a beautiful thing, but we got along great. Emily was a little naive, and we took advantage of that quite often. Trying to get a rise out of her. We'd say some things that were nuts, and we could never really get a reaction out of her. But it was just because she didn't get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tommy Lee Wallace. I've been a huge Tommy Lee Wallace fan, since the whole history of the Halloween movies with John Carpenter. And what a lot of people don't know is the one part in the Halloween movie is where Michael Myers is kind of going through the closet door was actually him, because he was the editor and production designer. And I think he said something along the lines of, he doesn't want Nick Castle to do this, because if Nick Castle messes up the take, then he's going to be mad at Nick Castle. So if Tommy stuffs it up, then he can only blame himself.
Right.
But what was he like as a director?
Well, he was very much the same way. Like when Pennywise reaches through the book, when we're all huddled around the photo album, that's Tommy Lee Wallace's hand.
Okay.
Very much a DIY guy. He was, if it had to be right, he wanted to do it. And it's not because he didn't trust anyone else. He just knew what he wanted.
Yeah.
And I think, for the sake of our movie being, as he would say, like champagne dreams, but a beer budget. We went into this shooting in June, knowing full well that we already had an air date in November. So we were already up against a pretty colossal time crunch to get this thing done. So I don't think Tommy had the luxury of training and rehearsing someone to do this effect. I mean, he just did it, and it worked so well. Tommy was a great director. I think he didn't let on that his patience was wearing thin with us, because we were just a bunch of rambunctious kids. But he was very much an actor's director, I think.
Okay.
He's really humble. He'll say he's a capable director, and I don't think that does him justice. I think he's a great storyteller, and I think he gave us a lot to work with. He helped us get where we had to be. So I would say he's very much an actor's director too, even though he may not ever admit that. That was my takeaway from working with Tommy. I think he's amazing.
Well, I mean, people are still talking about that movie, which, Tim Curry's portrayal was amazing. And, what was it like working with him? What was his process like? Was he in character all the time?
No. And I was quite surprised, because I was really just starting to understand acting at that age. I've been doing it for 10 years, but this was the first thing I had that had any real gravity, any real meaning. So I'm starting to understand acting, and I'd heard so much about English actors in particular. It's because of the respect that acting is as a trade in England. You go to a West End show, and the first thing you see in each company member's bio is where they trained. At Guildford, etc. I mean, they treat it like a real trade over there. Excuse me, just getting over something.
No worries.
So so I was very intimidated. Plus, I mean, I knew who Tim Curry was, and I knew who he was on a show that I really liked at the time that had Jonathan Banks in it and Ken Wall. It was called wise guy.
Mm.
And I think Hunt for Red October was out. So there was a lot of Tim Curry happening out in the wild at the time.
Yeah.
So I was very sort of nervous to meet him. And when I finally did, he had already shot. It was the scene where I see him as my father on the water. And he'd already
Right.
shot his bit. The dad had already shot his bit.
Yeah.
And so it was very close to the Barrens area. So that's where the base camp was. And so we were walking through the Barrens. I'm walking to set. He's walking from set. And the assistant director that was taking me there, I think she noticed that I was like clenching up, you know. Is this the first time you've met Tim? I was like, yes. And for the first time in my life, I was truly starstruck.
Yeah.
But he was so gracious too. You know, said, "This is Brandon Crane. He's Ben Hanscom. He's really, you know, happy to meet you." And he said, "Well, here I am. Break a leg." And he promptly turned around and walked off. So when we weren't rolling, you know, when we weren't doing it, he was Tim. Emily says there's been a few times when she would walk by and he'd kind of sneer and growl. But apart from that, that's just being playful. It certainly wasn't some kind of method manifestation.
Yeah.
You know, he was just Tim. And especially, you know, when we were fighting Tim at the very end, fighting Pennywise, he was just Tim as he's going through the motions until Tommy says, "Okay, let's try one for rehearsal." And instantly he's Pennywise, which is just terrifying. And it was something for me. It was a masterclass that wasn't lost on me at all. Like the fact that he could just be Tim, quiet Tim, and then
Just switch.
turn it. The switch gets flipped, and you can't help but feel the energy that he's emanating. So I also learned a lot about give and take. You know, it's not just about my line, bullshit, my line. It's about being present, and you can't help but be present when you're working with someone like that.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, I'll never forget that. I learned so much from him just being there.
I heard that initially they were actually considering some other actors for the role of Pennywise. I think one of them was Alice Cooper, which would have been pretty interesting. but I mean, Tim Curry is, I mean, again, the fact that people are still, there's a lot of comparing going on between the 1990s version and the, you know, the one that was made in 2017 and 2019. And I've got a segment out on it, which I did a couple of weeks ago, where I basically said, you can't really compare the two. You know, it's different eras.
Yeah.
It's, you know, the budgets were completely different.
That's an understatement, right?
Yes.
There.
Yeah. I mean, the special effects were, I mean, it's so much more advanced now.
And even the practical stuff. You know, they did a lot of compositing, which is something that, you know, is an old trick.
Yeah.
You know, I know, not to interrupt you, but I know a lot of people were really concerned about the amount of CGI in chapter 1. And I'm not sure about the CGI. I think a lot of it was compositing and you know, some old school methods, but just executed amazingly.
Yeah, it's I'm definitely not knocking the newer version. I mean, Bill Skarsgård and, you know, just the whole cast did an excellent job. It's I think it's kind of just I've got a bias because I grew up during that time, and you know, you guys made the movie that scared the shit out of a generation.
Right.
And and it's a thing now with clowns. I mean, there's you know, clown movies coming out. There's a new one that's doing particularly well called Terrifier. I think it's Terrifier 2 now, which is doing very well. But yeah, it's you know, it's talking about CGI and special effects. The spider, I heard there's a lot of you know, there's a lot of legend behind the spider. You know, it production was halted in getting it to Canada because you know border patrol were kind of
That's a
like, you
new
know,
one. I
what
haven't heard that.
apparently it was quite a mission to work it, because people had to man the legs. You had another
Yeah.
crew that had to man the deadlights.
Yeah, you had someone inside the frame
As
of the
well.
thing.
Yeah.
You know, which is when you see it in person, you imagine a human figure fitting in there and not dying or being crushed is quite a feat.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing it at the soundstage where we shot the final climax, and I just remember we were kind of given a little tour. You know, there were guys with the radio controllers that were making the pinchers move, and for its time, it was actually really well done. I think where people, the actual apparatus, the actual creature that they made is not to be confused with the stop motion creature that is, you know, shown in so many of the long shots. And I think that detracts from what I think was a pretty masterful execution.
But I think that's what most of the people are kind of thinking. Was that stop motion?
Right.
Yeah.
And some of it was, you know, the long shots, most certainly. But the stuff where it's close up, I mean, there is a person inside that apparatus, and there are people off camera, you know, operating this puppet. And I again, for its time, I think it was actually pretty cool. The end result, you know, kind of a scandal. Right.
Well, again, people are still talking about the movie.
Yeah, well, I mean,
and
that, you know what, this goes back to Tommy Lee Wallace, if I may.
Yeah.
He was given this massive project to run in a very limited amount of time. We'd already had an air date, and as he says in the documentary that just came out, he pretty much had to rework the second act by himself. And he had to find a way to take an unfinished second chapter and make it work.
Yeah.
So this is where, you know, some people, they're feel like it's mired in controversy, but the reality is, as a craftsman, Tommy Lee Wallace took the bull by the horns and finished the job. And I don't think he got paid any extra for doing it either. I mean, he's just if he's capable, you know, he's a capable writer. I mean, I think he did as good a job as he possibly could. Because Larry Cohen, who wrote the first half and started the second, kind of jumped ship, and kind of left Tommy holding the stick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Tommy figured it out and had to go.
I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah.
Why did you jump ship?
You know, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was a little bit of, oh my God, we got to make this a 2-part thing. It's only going to be, you know, 2 episodes. And then the other was Carrie the musical was getting workshopped in London.
Okay.
And he was writing the book for that. So you know, I think that's where his focus was. He wasn't available.
Okay. You mentioned you read the book. Were you the only cast member that actually read the book beforehand? Because I've read the book as well. It's a long read. It's it takes a while. And answer that question.
Well, it was put in my hands by my friend who lived down the street from me. He was a couple years older, so he was giving me like all the cool stuff. You know, when you're 14, there's kind of a barrier. You can't just walk into a Borders or Barnes and Noble or something and buy, you know, porn for all intents and purposes. And he said, "Hey, there's this part in this book. You got to read it. It's insane." So without any context. So I read that and I was like, "Oh, interesting."
Is that the orgy scene?
Right, the orgy scene, the ritual, but it compelled me to want to start over,
Yeah.
and actually read the book, and which I did, and that's when I realized, oh my God, I am this guy. I
Yeah.
am Ben Hanscom. Yeah, I mean that was, that was it for me. I don't think anyone else had read it, and I think someone asked us that question not too long ago when we were all together, and I think, um, I know Ben didn't read the book because his agent told him not to, because he didn't want it to affect his performance,
Mm.
which I can understand. And I think everyone else got to the book afterwards.
Well, I mean, how old were you when you read it? Because it's a like I said, I think it's about 1,000. It's close to 1,200 pages. It's a thick book.
Yeah, no, I was 13. It was around Thanksgiving of 89.
Okay.
So yeah, right. And we shot this in June of 90. So
Mm.
yeah, so I was 13 and a half, almost 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There are a lot of scenes in the book. Obviously, it's a lot of scenes didn't make both movies.
Right.
Both adaptations.
Right.
Were there any scenes that you would have liked to have seen that kind of come to memory? Obviously, it's difficult to now regurgitate it from reading it a while back.
No, I mean the first movie in 2017 covered some bases
Yes.
that I wish we'd had. Um, particularly, um, particularly going back to, like Egg Boy and the explosion from 100 years before.
Yeah.
Um, there was some of that I was satisfied by, but the big freaking nerd in me wanted to see this massive battle, with Maturin, the turtle. And obviously we didn't have that in the miniseries. I mean, because it goes into a cocaine fueled,
Yes.
it goes into this cocaine fueled abstract,
Yeah.
battle of the ages in space.
Yes.
But I would love to have seen something like that. And I think the closest that we come to that is in, it may be chapter 2, when we're in Bill's bedroom as a child, and there is a turtle on his nightstand. I think that's the closest we get.
There's another part that I saw when they were swimming in that creek or in the lake or whatever. And then I think it was Bill that said he felt something, and then he went underwater and he said, "It's a turtle."
Who's that? Somebody point right here. Right here. It's a turtle.
And immediately that snapped in me. I'm like, is that a type of Easter egg or?
Yeah, somehow I must have missed that. Yeah, I must have missed that.
Now you also had a part in chapter 2, the boardroom scene, which a lot of people don't know. How did that come about?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for letting us present to you today. Now, this will include over 1 million square feet of commercial and residential space.
It's a fun story. When the trailer dropped that day for the first movie, and it literally broke the internet.
Yes.
And it became the most downloaded, most viewed trailer in YouTube history. At the time, I had been following along the process. Like, I'd already talked to Jeremy Ray Taylor. For whatever it was worth, I reached out to him when he was cast, and I was like, "Hey, dude, crush it. Whatever it's worth. I mean, you don't need my blessing, but if there's anything I can do to help you, I'm here for you." And Jared did the same thing with Nick Hamilton. And so we kept in touch. So I was following the creative team and following them on Facebook, Instagram, just so I could consume whatever tidbits they felt like leaking out to us, right? So I talked to Andy. I reached out to Andy, the director, on Facebook, and we kind of started a conversation. I was like, "It doesn't matter what I think, but this trailer looks so promising, and I cannot wait to see the film. Best of luck, Brandon." And so he clapped back, and he's like, "Oh my God, no, I loved you in the miniseries." And so we just kind of kept this dialogue. So the night that it started screening, I went to see it. We all did in our all local hometowns. I mean, Marlon brought a balloon with him, I think, and I think Adam tried to cosplay as Eddie. We're all in spirit, like together, very supportive of this thing. And so I got home and I messaged Andy on Facebook. I was like, this was the greatest thing I've ever seen. It totally crushed my expectations. Can't wait for chapter 2. He said, you should do a cameo. I'm looking at my phone. Like, is this, I know I haven't worked in 10 years. Is this how the world works right now? Like, am I literally getting cast on Facebook? But I also followed him on Instagram where he was verified, and he was not verified at the time on Facebook. So,
okay.
Oh shit. Really?
You're being trolled.
Like, I'm being trolled, and I trolled myself, right? So flip over to Instagram. I sent him a DM and I'm like, oh shit, dude. Hey, hi Andy. I'm Brandon. I'm having the strangest conversation over on Facebook right now, and I'm just wondering if, I'm being trolled over here. And nothing. It said seen, it was left on red. I'm just like, well, shit. That's humiliating. Of course, that's exactly how this goes. And then I put my phone down and it dings back and it's Andy. He says, ha 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 ha, I'm the troll. I was like, thank God, And he's like, yeah, you should do a cameo. What do you, what should we do? And they hadn't even written the script yet. So, we were talking about being an associate of Beverly Marsh or Ricky Lee as they introduced Ben Hanscom. And so that was a departure from the book as well. Ben Hanscom's introduced sitting in a bar drinking a gallon of whiskey.
Yeah.
And instead we're at Hanscom and Associates. But it was such an honor. I mean, this was what, September 2017 when we talked about this, and I had to keep it secret for 2 years, more or less. It took a year to get on set, and then almost a year before the movie came out. That was an amazing experience, though.
I can imagine. It's it's really coming full circle, isn't it? Because again, you were now, you played the part when you were a kid, and now, fast forward, what, 29 years later?
They didn't have to do that, man. They really didn't. And
that is awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, just they stuck their neck out for me. It was great. I mean, they had me read it and submit a tape so they could show it to New Line to show that I could still do the work,
Yeah.
And I don't blame them at all. I mean, we're not even talking about indie cinema. We're talking about the full might and weight of the studio system, and it is big business. Like I wouldn't begrudge them for saying, nah, you know what, this isn't really going to work out because you're out of shape or you're out of practice, whatever.
Yeah.
And they did it, and it I mean, it was such an honor, and that goes in the memory banks forever.
It was so cool to see from from a fan of the original, which will be from my generation. The newer generation probably didn't notice anything or didn't and I mean, fair play, you can't really blame them, but no. I enjoyed when they do that in films these days. They kind of pay tribute to the actors that started whether it be a franchise or a different adaptation of films. It's pretty cool to see. When while acting as a kid, and I had Andre Gower on the podcast a couple of months back from the Monster Squad.
Yeah, I used to watch him play drums when he was a kid. He was great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I asked him about the pressures of getting into that business that young. I mean, you hear of all the horror stories with the Coreys and Macaulay Culkin, and obviously very sad to with the passing of Jonathan Brandis. I mean, I used to watch him growing up in a bunch of movies like, you know, The Neverending Story 2, Ladybugs. I mean, there's so many. You know, how important is it to surround yourself with the right people, whether it be family, management, agents, whatever?
I think it's across the board, and I don't think that's even relegated to acting or this business.
Mm,
You know, in anything you do, you need to have
yeah.
a support system, but you need to have an earnest support system. You have to, you know, an agent's going to have an agenda because an agent wants to make money, right?
Yes.
The agent gets you the work, you get money. Your attorneys, you get work, they get 5%. Your management, if you have one, they get, you know, 10%, 15%. I mean, it's in their interest to have you working at all costs. I'm not saying they're all sinister. It's business. You
Yeah.
know, they provide an essential function.
Mm,
Even now, even though I got cast in it chapter 2 on Instagram, you know, they still serve a very important function. And you know, at the end of the day, they will negotiate to protect you by
yeah.
and large. That's their job. Um, my mom had her own business when I started acting, and we lived near San Diego. So going from San Diego to Los Angeles isn't a reasonable commute, right?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, it was literally a function of when it suited her, right? When she had time to do this. This was like, we treated it like an after school sport.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it was healthy. As I started getting a lot more work, we started moving closer and closer
Mm.
to Los Angeles incrementally. Like, we didn't just pack up all our shit and, you know, throw everything, you know, to the wind
Yeah.
and roll the dice and go, oh, you know, we're going to make it. It wasn't about that at all.
Yeah, I think because you know, when that happens, it kind of becomes more about the parent who's
It
chasing
does.
the dream than
It
yeah.
really does. And they live vicariously through their kids. Not to
Yes.
say my mother was not proud of me, right? But when we're making a leap like that, I worked just enough for it to be problematic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know,
With the traveling.
with the traveling, with missing school, things like
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
You know, when you're a regular on a TV show like
Mm.
Fred Savage or Josh Saviano were when we were working on Wonder Years,
On Wonder Years, yes.
you have your curriculum that's sent to you from your home school, and you do your school with your teacher and all that. It was hard for my teachers who aren't used to that to have to take time out of every day when they see 180 kids to put together a packet for me back then. I didn't have the kind of support that
Mm.
that kids demand now. Like, that
Yeah.
was just not a thing. So it made sense for us to get closer to the industry. Um, and she could still do her thing. There were a lot of parents that I remember coming across that were so aggressive and so mean to the other kids. You know, or you know, it's that whole stage mom thing. I mean, it
Yeah.
is true. It is very, very real. My mother, on the other hand, was funny. Of course, these were the days, you know, before we were, you know, putting trackers on kids.
The
She
good old
didn't-
days.
she didn't want anything to do with that dynamic, like the waiting room dynamic where the parents are talking about, oh, well, so and so's got a job offer for this and blah blah blah. Like, she didn't care about that.
Mm.
We'd pull up and she's like, you know where you're going? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I would sign myself in. I would sign myself out. I would go in there, read the fucking words, and leave. right?
Yeah.
Um, and and uh, and it was the same thing too. Like, hands off when I'm at work. You know, she didn't have to hover over me to see what I was doing. She would just go grab a book and trust the system. You know,
Mm.
I mean, and it was fine. I never experienced anything like, you know, these other like famous kids did, you know, with the grooming or you know, the abuse or any of that stuff. That wasn't my reality whatsoever. I had a parent who was totally supportive um to a point, and kept it about me and not her. Again,
Yeah.
it was we can do this when it suits her.
Yeah.
So she was a grounding force for me
Mm.
in many ways.
It was a good balance,
I think so.
basically. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Andre kind of said the same thing. He said, you did the Monster Squad, he did about, a bunch of stuff as a kid, but then he kind of went on hiatus. He went to high school, played basketball and that type of stuff. And yeah, he also just says his parents, his sister, they were all very supportive, and that's kind of what kept him. I mean, he's such a down to earth guy. He's a great guy, and yeah, well, I can tell you are as well. So, but in the in the movie, I mean, to me, and I think a general consensus from what I've read and from what I've heard, the first part of the miniseries that you were in was more popular than the second part. So, and you guys pretty much carried the load in the first part, which is no mean feat. I mean, there were great actors in the second part as grown-ups, as the grown-ups of the Losers Club.
Right.
Annette
they
O'Toole,
were the draw.
John Ritter. Yeah.
But they were the draw. I mean, they weren't they were the heavyweights of television.
Yes. Yeah.
And back then there was a real delineation between television acting and TV stars weren't necessarily film stars.
Yeah.
They were two kind of separate worlds. And they were very much the draw. But I think this is the part where we talk about how the second half couldn't have been spectacular, really, just because there's so much material that you have to omit. It becomes utility. You still had to do flashbacks to kind of reestablish some backstories. I think I can't believe that both iterations got away with just two parts. Let's put it that way. But I think because we were all relatively unknown as well, it was easier for them to just see us as who we are, as opposed to looking at John Ritter and seeing Jack Tripper from Three's Company, or Harry Anderson from Night Court, or Tim Reed from Baghdad Cafe. It's I think the fact that they were so deliberate with us as well was also the lightning in the bottle, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I think the beginning was. I just think that all of the attention was put on the beginning. I mean, it may have been easier to write than trying to wrap up, the adults and coming to terms with everything they missed since they left Derry. I mean, I feel like the kids chapter is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's almost formulaic in the sense that we get together, we each have our own problems, we get together and we defeat the monster, end scene, right? Got to find a way to bring the losers back, and then to have the losers cope with the things that they saw. I just think the second half was just a much more difficult thing to pull off. I think, from an audience standpoint, I think a lot of people kind of long for the innocence of just being a kid again, and just, going through that. I mean, as kid, a lot of kids do believe in monsters and stuff like that. And I think that kind of was an appeal as well, whereas so now they're grown-ups, and, and you kind of see the cast or the characters who are grown up, they're busy with, grown-up shit, basically.
Right, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Annette O'Toole's character is in an abusive relationship. It's I think that could in part maybe be it. I don't know. Well, I'm speaking from my point of view. I have no idea.
Oh yeah. At the end of the day, there is that extra layer with the kids too.
Yeah.
And that is this coming of age story, and how we get together and overcome this, horrific, killer. I think that may have been the secret sauce.
Yeah. The were you guys on set with the grown-ups a lot? The grown-up versions of yourselves?
Excuse me, that cough is
Oh.
nuts. No, I mean, not really. The first time I met John Ritter was the first day I ever came to set, and that was just to get my haircut. Tommy Lee
Okay.
Wallace had my haircut as a kid, so again, a testament to the details. He was kind of supervising my haircut because he really wanted my character to have the same one he did. And then he introduced me to John Ritter, and we got to talking, and he taught me a lot in that 30 minutes that we were together, just about how to approach a role. I mean, this was a different leap for me. This was like the next level.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
Evolution for me. So we settled on some business that would kind of help tie us together, which thank fuck for that, because pardon me, but honestly, of all the losers, we looked the least alike. So so it was good for us to find something, to tie us together. I know Ben had the same kind of thing. He and Richard Mazer got together at his hotel, back when you can do that without raising eyebrows, and figure out what business we could do to tie us to our adult counterparts. And because we had to shoot kind of hard and fast, there was a lot of overlapping. So if there were settings where both the adult and child losers were inhabiting, they would try and shoot back to back, so there were a few instances where we had some downtime in Stanley Park, and they were there. So we got to spend a little bit of time. I taught John Ritter how to play Tetris. That was cool. With my game.
Okay.
It was good, but I mean, apart from those kind of passing ship moments, we weren't together very often.
Okay. And just with regards to
Probably could have just said that, but
no, it's fine. It's fine. Go into detail. It's great. With regards to Pennywise, well, the newer Pennywise, I heard they were initially they were gonna cast, or they offered the role to Will Poulter.
Yeah, that would have been interesting.
And apparently he said after a while he doesn't want to do it because this is what I read. I don't have the inside scoop, but he said the role was just almost like too intimidating because he has to go to a really dark place. Or
that's the thing most people don't know about Will Poulter, is that he's a fantastic actor.
Yeah, he is. It would have been interesting if he did take the role.
I think he could have done I think he's done a great job. But I also think he kind of came with Cary Fukunaga, who was originally supposed to direct it. In fact, the screenplay for the first one was written by Cary Fukunaga and Gary Dauberman.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Gary ended up writing chapter 2 all by himself. But I think that ship left with Cary, and I think Andy. I don't think that was an option for Andy.
Yeah, I remember the lead up to production when this was going on between Fukunaga and Andy Machete. What was the story there? Because at one point I thought, is this thing ever going to get made?
They've threatened to remake this movie at least 4 times, I think, since we released ours. I mean, so every time they announce, there's they're shopping a script around right now for it, take it with a grain of salt, because it doesn't come through after 3 times. You're like, it's bullshit, and that's fine. Maybe this doesn't need to be remade. Maybe we don't have to revisit this.
Yeah.
And part of that was me being like 40 or less than 40 even, and not wanting to be classic and get dusty up on someone's shelf. Like, I don't want to be, I'm too young to be classic anything, right? So, part of me was like, well, shit, if they make this new movie, they're going to forget about ours. And that's that, and if that's the evolution of things, that's the evolution of things. Looking back, I'm like, yeah, no, there's room for both, because there's room for both. I think Tim Curry's performance is iconic, and it sets the miniseries apart from anything else.
It does. I think it might have opened up a new audience to the miniseries in today's generation, because obviously they've heard about it, so they're inclined to watch it. Yeah.
No, it certainly did, and especially the new losers demographic too. I mean,
yes,
they're 1 out of every 4 kids on Instagram probably had a Losers Club Stan account, and that trickled into us as well. I mean, we have I engage in conversation quite often. I mean, I'm proud of this thing. Why wouldn't I want to talk about it?
Definitely.
If someone's interested and I've got the time, I'm happy to talk about it. But if we meet kids who weren't even born yet, kids younger than my kids, who are into this, that we meet at conventions, it most certainly has everything to do with that gap between the release of the trailer in May and September, because the first thing that popped up on iTunes, and Amazon, etc., was the miniseries. The first thing that was back on the shelves at Walmart, in the States, or Mazda in the UK, like it was it.
Yeah.
So I think because the anticipation was there, I think people went and sought out the original, and were exposed to it for the first time. Yes. And then you had other people that kind of wanted a refresher course on the story, refamiliarize themselves with the miniseries that they may not have seen for a while, or even decades, So there was a lot of interest in the miniseries, and it just all kind of came together at once. We started producing that documentary around the time the first film was released. So there was definitely a sort of rapidly expanding fandom around that miniseries, and it's incredible. I mean, I wouldn't be doing conventions if the new movie wasn't a thing. I don't think I don't know what the future of the miniseries would have looked like had it not been put to film.
Well, had it not been as good as it was. I mean, I think it was, based on the budget you guys had, it was a TV miniseries, and, in my opinion, it's a classic. I mean, again, I might be biased, but I've heard a lot of people, in the newer generation saying they loved it. They loved Tim Curry's portrayal. I've actually spoken to a few said Tim Curry's portrayal is more believable, and they kind of enjoyed it more from a psychological aspect. It's kind of more real.
I'll kill you all. I'll drive you crazy and I'll kill you all.
I subscribe to that too. There are a lot of people that ask, who's your favorite, Tim Curry or Skarsgård? And I think, of course, I'm going to say Tim Curry. And my opinion of his Pennywise is shaped and solidified in the first 2 minutes of the movie.
I know exactly which scene you're talking about. Yeah.
For me, I found that the thing that not bothered me, but resonated with me the most is when you see this believable clown behind this billowing sheet.
Yes.
Who is able to lure a child, and then the sheet moves, and there is that one face.
Yes.
That Pennywise face that says "Hello, lunch."
Yeah.
Something so sinister.
And that sets up the whole movie.
And unexpected, and it sets up the whole movie.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess the point for me is Tim Curry's Pennywise can be seductive at first glance, right? When Eddie Kaspbrak sees Pennywise holding the balloons for the first time in the new film,
Yes.
If I was Eddie Kaspbrak and I saw that fucking guy with that face
Yeah.
and that outfit, I would not linger. I would be gone, and I would be checking myself into an institution right away because I can't believe I just saw that. There's
There's nothing inviting about Skarsgård's portrayal. I mean, it's a different kind of horror, to me, anyways. I think the Tim Curry's portrayal is kind of more believable. The clown kind of, you'd expect, a clown invites kids in, and then
100%. That's the trap. I mean,
Yes.
that's the trap. And I never saw the trap in the first movie. That's not to say that in chapter 2, that doesn't exist. Like with the little girl behind the bleachers in chapter 2, there is a moment where it's a little frightening, but because of the way he's talking to the kid,
he's also in the shadows, which helps.
Right. But when he comes out of the shadows, he does it in a way that is kind of seductive.
Yeah.
There's that moment. I mean, you see a little more humanity in that Pennywise and in chapter 2, which, if I put them both together, sells it for me. It's fine. But the contrast, though, from that seduction angle is vast. Like it's wide. Yeah.
No, it is. I mean, it's different scares as well. Like I said, to me, the first one was a little bit more psychological. With the music, and it's very dreary music, but you've already been introduced to the clown, so that whole atmosphere is kind of set, and you kind of know that this is going to be good.
Yeah, and it lingers. I mean,
yes.
there's this foreboding that just kind of hovers over absolutely everything.
Yes,
that appears to me in chapter 1, with the new one. Because he like when Jeremy's getting cut, they actually go there, and he's getting cut when Henry Bowers is pushing him up against the fence.
Yeah.
That fog, right, is the same fog. It's not as persistent in the new movies, but when it comes, it's there. Like when the family is driving by in the station wagon, watching, Henry Bowers terrorize Ben Hanscom. You see it, and it's the same thing.
It
just comes and goes.
It does, and coupled with quite a few jump scares.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that garage scene.
Oh, geez, where they got that projector playing
was amazing.
Yes, no, that was well done. That was brilliant.
Absolutely well done.
Yeah,
that is the moment in chapter 1 that strikes me the most.
No, that was an amazing scene.
I turned to the person I was watching the movie with, and and I was like, "Holy shit! Did you just see that?" It was so that particular moment was so well executed.
There are a lot of, I mean, I'm not knocking the new version at all. I mean, it was so well done. Again, there are a lot of parts in the film, in the book, that were in this version, which which wasn't in the in the 90s adaptation, like the Paul Bunyan statue that comes to life. The house on Neibold Street is almost completely ignored, I think, in the 90s one, isn't it?
Sort of.
It's not as they don't really go into it as much.
Yeah, no, Stan has a moment where he goes into that house.
Yes, he does. He does.
But it's not really framed as,
the house on Neibold Street.
Connected to, it's not Neibold Street. It's not, connected to the sewer system. It's none of that. I mean, we would have entered the sewer, through that house, if it had been established that way. I mean, so the standpipe, he goes into a house. Stan goes to a house instead of into the standpipe. He sees a mummy instead of
yes.
Dead. Like there are a few liberties that you think could have made it into the first movie, but I'm 100% assured that those were liberties that had to be taken for utility.
Okay.
and for time. You know, we had to compete not just for television, like censorship and et cetera, standards and practices, but we also had to account for commercial breaks. You know, the you, you have to. There's something special that's different about when you're writing for television versus writing for cinema, right? You have to structure the breaks like acts. And I mean,
Okay.
every film has several acts, of course. Every play has acts, etc. But you have to let people down. You have to ease them out of the story for a moment. That's why some cuts, when you're watching an older film and it's being played on television, when they cut to a commercial, it's like jarring. You're like, what the okay, I guess I'm out now. You have to structure television to go with the commercials. Like it goes without saying. So you'll find a lot of cuts that ease you into a commercial break and ease you out. You know, whereas in a regular film, it might cut in the middle of a scene.
Yeah.
And then you know, or the minute that comes back up, you're in the middle of dialogue. You know, there's no ramping up or ramping down for the commercial. So I mean, there's a lot of things I think you have to there are a lot of liberties you have to take, I think. And I think they had to for ours.
How long did you
as a casualty, I guess.
How long did you guys shoot? How long was the miniseries? How what time period was that shot in?
So I think we shot it in a couple months. Like I said, fast and hard. I mean,
yes, which is also a characteristic of television, right?
It can be. I mean, it really can be. This was a pretty large production, though. All things considered. I'd done movie of the weeks and things like that. Standard, you know, television fare, and it was always shot to film, anyway. So a lot of those processes were baked in, and this was a much larger scale.
Okay.
Because they treated it like a feature film. It was not a skeleton crew. This was a big production.
Why didn't they just make it into a film back then?
Well, they didn't do that too much. You were hard pressed to find movies. I mean, apart from like Star Wars, and you couldn't treat this like a serial. You know, the old timey serials that would play before a feature in a movie theater. You know, the Star Wars movies, the Indiana Jones movies, they were all completely separate films.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, I mean, you know, Tommy Lee Wallace, immediately Halloween comes to mind.
Sure.
Well, I suppose it's
studio. We're following the arc of a character, though, and in Halloween, you know, 2's case, we're not, you know, it's like an anthology. But to tell a cohesive story from start to finish, we didn't really do that back then.
Okay.
And that's why, I mean, there are people who saw chapter 1 who never saw chapter 2. You know, bless them, because for them, the story begins and ends. But in our situation, because like the book, it's not linear. You know, we're doing a lot of flashbacks and establishing adults versus kids, etc.
Yeah.
We start with the adults and the kids, just like the book. It's not really in any linear order. I don't think it would have lended itself to features.
Okay.
At least not that adaptation. And I think, you know, apart from like Stand By Me, etc., there really wasn't a precedent. You know, we don't really like to see kids in danger, at least not then. I think it's a different world now, right? I think
I almost want to say, you know, unfortunately in some regards, but I mean, but yeah, I mean, again, it just goes back to how people are still comparing the original to the new one, which I mean, just speaks volumes of not only Tim Curry's portrayal, but like I said, I mean, you guys carried the first chapter. I mean, the first part of the miniseries. It was just, I mean, Yeah, and again, I grew up with it. I think I was probably about 7 or 8 when I saw it the first time. And I mean, like you said, I only had to see the opening scene, and I was
Right.
scarred for life. with regards to clowns. But
No, that moment right there will ruin it for you. I mean, it really will.
It ruins it for me in that regard, but it's I mean, you can bet I'm going to stay and watch the whole thing because of that scene. It was just, it was just so well done. The whole movie, the whole miniseries, basically the 2-parter, which is kind of what they did with, they actually did that with The Shining in the 90s as well, after the original with Jack Nicholson.
Right.
Right.
They did a miniseries too, and I mean they could do that because we set a precedent.
But that was pretty good as well. Yeah,
I preferred the miniseries.
I also preferred the miniseries, funnily enough. Well, I did.
Yeah. Stephen King, I think, prefers the miniseries to the film as well. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, it was groundbreaking. I mean, Tommy Knockers came. There were a lot of things that came from that.
Yes, Tommy Knockers as well.
And when you're looking at something like of elephantine proportions, like those stories, voluminous, pages, miniseries format sort of proved to be a viable option to tackle something that large.
Yeah.
And plus, I could also say the studio system back then would, if they knew you had something you could shoot beginning to end, like Back to the Future. It took them years to revisit Back to the Future, but they shot 2 and 3 back to back. Had there been more, films done that way, and it looked like it was feasible. I mean, they did that because Back to the Future 1 was such a great success.
Yes,
right? It was a good business decision. If you spec'd out 2 films, I think it would have been it'd be riskier for theatrical than for television. Because what if the first one flops? Yeah. So the risk, the risk factor. Are you going to go back? Are you going to go back and shoot chapter 2 because you have to, or are you going to,
when it's going to be a loss,
and hope, and the studios, they make those decisions too. I mean, they'll put things out that they know aren't going to make any money just to keep their profile up. I mean, that's just the name of the game. But back then, I cannot imagine them taking that risk.
Well, in hindsight now, I suppose they made the right decision, because the success of the miniseries, it would probably be a little bit arrogant to say almost kind of guaranteed the some success of the newer version, because I think a lot of parents have took their kids to see the miniseries before the newer version came out.
For sure. There were a shitload of downloads, man. I mean,
I can imagine.
There was a lot. I don't think it's arrogant to say that the success of the 2017 film was partly because of the miniseries. I
just don't want to offend anyone.
No. But I mean, you have a generation of people that, like me, people my age, that love the first one, and we're excited to see it done, updated. I mean, who may not have been interested or familiar with that had they not been exposed to the miniseries beforehand. I mean,
yes,
we're not a generation of avid readers anymore.
No. Well, exactly. That's
another thing too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think it's arrogant to say some of the success has to do.
Well, I mean, to think of it now, I don't think I would have known about it had it not been for the miniseries.
Right.
Because I mean, I would have seen the book and I would have been like, geez, it's a pretty, it's an intimidating book. It's 1,200 pages. Not a lot of kids are going to go, are going to read it.
That must know about the ritual.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, no, that was I think it was the ritual of Chud.
That's right.
Was that was, geez, Yeah, Stephen King's done some weird shit.
Does, but you know what? It's kind of fun. The imagination and putting it to pen is limitless. And he still manages to write people better than anyone else. And I think more specifically, children. I don't know what it is, but I'm hard pressed to find an author at the top of my head that I think does justice to the psyche of children better than Stephen King. I don't think there is one.
Have you ever met him?
No.
Did he visit the set?
No. Yeah, I don't know what that was about. I know he's mentioned before that he considered himself a curse. He felt like after Pet Sematary, his involvement with the adaptations, unless it's a miniseries that he's written or something, personally or adapted personally, his involvement was the kiss of death.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, chapter 2 kind of proved that wrong. I think that cameo was one of the most noteworthiest cameos, if that's even English, in history, really, if you think about it. So well executed and so well acted by Stephen King. You know, he'll probably be the first to tell you he's no actor, but I think he did an amazing job.
Yeah, and that cameo was when he was in the antique shop, I think it was.
Yeah. Oh yeah, not the antique store. Yeah.
That bike used to be mine.
Well, it's mine now. But you're the big author. You want it. You can afford it.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's taking the piss out of his own work, which is hilarious. I mean, there's so much to talk about with that cameo. I just thought it was masterfully done. But yeah, no, he didn't make his presence felt at all with this project, and I think it may have something to do with the direction that it took in production. Now, George Romero was supposed to be the first director, and when it went from, I think, 8 nights to 3 nights, or not 8 nights, 4 nights to 3 nights, he started waffling, and when the network went to 2 nights, he said, "Good luck." And I think maybe at that point, I mean, that's also kind of when Larry Cohen checked out. I mean, you know, he did the screenplay for Carrie, and I mean, he's done a lot of adaptations. For Stephen King. I think maybe his enthusiasm, maybe he distanced himself from it. I honestly, I don't know. To this day, still never met him. I was in front of his house 4 weeks ago. Yeah. We had a reunion in Bangor, Maine, and we did the whole Stephen King tour, which was amazing. And you know, one of the stops was Stephen King's house, and we had a photo op with fans out front of the house with, you know, as many of the losers as we could assemble. And that was something else. And I know Marlon, you know, who was Mike Hanlon, he was shouting over the fence trying to get his attention. Like it was awesome. I wish it had worked because I know he was home. There's 3 or 4 weeks out of the year where he's home. And that was one of them. And it you know, it would have been great to meet him, even if the cops were involved.
Yeah.
It still would have been a win.
Yeah.
It would have been.
It would have been it would have been a great story. And then to try and explain who you guys actually are.
Oh yeah, but did you die is the question. You know,
Yes.
That's something you tell your kids. That'd be great.
Yeah.
You know, I think it would be great to meet him. It's funny, you know, we did a podcast when the documentary came out, and we were all kind of talking off. You know, once it was done, it was nice. They let us kind of keep the room for a little while and have a catch up session. You know, there's Seth Green and we had everybody.
Yeah.
Save Jonathan, of course. but we were talking about how we never met the guy. I was like, oh man, if I ever meet Stephen King, I have so much to thank him for. And Seth Green was like, he doesn't want to hear that shit. Like, just say, great to meet you, you know? So, and it's true. I don't know what I would say other than, you know, thanks. if I met him.
I mean, the imagination that guy has is, you know, I don't know if, well, you know, you hear different stories. I heard that he couldn't remember writing Cujo.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. Based on
Because-
the things that I've heard about, you know, how he was living on the wild side for a while.
Yeah.
And I can imagine it. And but at the same time, when I was on the tour, you know, they were the tour guide did some deep dives into Stephen King's past. You know, and attributes everything we know about Stephen King and all of his work and all of his success to having, like we were talking about before, being surrounded by people that were good. You know, his original publisher, they were just scam artists. You know, they were giving him pennies on the dollar. Tried to lock him up and saw him as a cash cow. And his wife urged him to go in a different direction. You know, his wife was working at Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
To make sure that he could have the time he needed to write. And I mean, she took manuscripts out of the trash, allegedly. This is all allegedly, but it all sort of pencils out in my mind.
Yeah.
You know, she was very much a grounding force, and I don't think without her, Stephen King as we know him would not be a thing.
I mean, the other thing is a lot of people just think he does horror. Look, he does horror. He's done some classics, but I mean, he's done The Green Mile as well. I mean,
2263.
Yes.
You know, he's not just a horror writer.
Yeah.
But he can find what's fantastical about the mundane.
Yes.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, that's actually very well put. Yeah. That's exactly what he does. And everything is set in Maine.
It is. It is. And I felt like when we were on this tour, I felt like some of it was lost on me. You know, I'm not an avid Stephen King reader. I haven't read his whole canon. A lot of the trivia was lost on me, but absolutely, Ohio Street is Kansas Street. You know, Carrie White is actually Carrie Black. I mean, there's so many things that especially that town. I don't know if you've ever been there. If you're a Stephen King fan, it is worth the pilgrimage. There's a lot of cool trivia, and what I found very interesting is all of the places that I remember them mentioning were more or less within a good walk's distance from his house.
Oh,
so you could set off from his house and walk a few blocks, and you're at the Standpipe. You're at, you know, Beverly Marsh's house. You're at Bill Denbrough's house. You're at Ohio Street. It's just, I can see that he could find inspiration fairly easily. And I think the town is so interesting as far as the way it's set up. There's, you know, where the side of the tracks are, the good side, the bad side, I don't know, it's just very interesting. It's very interesting, but I could see without question where he could draw his inspiration, like easily. Take the dog for a walk and come up with another book right there.
Okay, so he basically draws inspiration from his surroundings, where he stays, where he lives.
Well, I think so. I mean, I wouldn't say all of it, but I was surprised to learn about so many things that were based on what you know. And you know what? And a writer will write about what they know.
Yeah.
You put a fantastical spin on it, but you still know it. You know, you can endow things on particular places, but you need the place to draw the inspiration from, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just cool. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like turn this into some like pedantic thing.
No, geez, I'm a big Stephen King fan.
But it was actually really cool. Even though half the stuff was lost on me on that tour, it was really great to actually put the inspiration.
I mean, if it wasn't for Stephen King, I wouldn't be talking to you now.
This is true.
In all likelihood, yeah.
Right. I wouldn't be talking to anybody except maybe the walls.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for Stephen King.
Yeah. Clowns wouldn't be feared.
Oh, they would be. I mean, if you think of Ronald McDonald, granted, there's a Ronald McDonald charity that does amazing work, but still, Ronald McDonald is probably the most prolific clown killer in the history of the world.
That is very true. That is very true. And
one Big Mac and one supersized French fry at a time.
That is very true. And then there was also John Wayne Gacy. So let me retract that. Yes.
Right.
Let me retract that previous statement.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
But I think those things helped play on it, and especially John Wayne Gacy, as far as like our miniseries is concerned.
Yes.
Thanks, dude. I mean,
yeah.
But thanks. Yeah, it helped.
No, it's been so cool. It's been such an awesome experience being able to chat to you. Thanks again for taking the time.
No, likewise.
It's kind of surreal to me. I always kind of tense up a little bit, and I did the same with Andre Gower. I was extremely nervous because you kind of live vicariously through those characters.
it's an escape.
It was as a kid, and I mean, it's I didn't only watch that It's adaptation once. I mean, I must have watched it about countless times. And
it's hard. Like, and I'm sure Andre probably said the same thing about Monster Squad. Like, you can't really watch your own work because you will sit there wiser and older, and you will pick it. Like, you'll pick the shit out of your performance, and you're like, oh, why did I say it like that? Why did I do that? But I mean, you may have seen it many times, but the more I talk about it, the more I remember. So it's as if I have as well.
And was it a fun experience filming? Was it good camaraderie between the cast? You mentioned you had your ups and downs, but all in all, it's been a great experience.
We had 99% ups, and the 1% of downs was just because we were working hard and we just get tired. And when you get tired, you get cranky. And when you're a kid, you may not know how to channel your frustration in an appropriate way.
Well, especially when you're that young.
No, exactly. It was definitely, like, I've said it. It was the summer of a lifetime. Honestly,
I can imagine. Yeah,
they were. These are friends for life, and together we accomplished something pretty damn magical.
Well, it's a classic.
Yeah, and I'm always going to be proud and thankful, and I'm glad that these people are still in my life.
As you should be. I mean, it's especially your character as well. It resonates with so many people, and you end up with the goal. Your character ends up with the goal at the end, so you win.
Right, man. Right. Don't forget it.
Yeah. Are you still in touch with a lot of the cast members?
Oh yeah, no, we get together from time to time. We'll do some conventions. I mean, we're all kind of scattered everywhere. Seth's the only one still in LA.
Okay.
Marlon and Adam, they see each other often. They both live in Seattle. Ben lives in Portland. Emily lives just outside of Vancouver. So we're all kind of scattered, but we do get together for cons, and when we do, we always show up a couple days early so we can hang out and reminisce, and that's great. Yeah, these are some of my favorite humans on earth.
Well, you guys shared a very unique experience, and I'm not talking about the ritual of Chud.
No, we never, and nothing like that ever happened. But we're still, as close as you can be without the sex. How's that?
Yeah. Exactly. Brandon, what else you got going on? I know you've got a very popular podcast, which is awesome. I've listened to it.
I cannot believe the reception that we've gotten so far. It's great. Like, we were monetized day one.
Wow.
No, it's the Errorist Podcast with Brandon Crane, and it's really just we're starting off with horror is a launch pad, but it really, at the end of the day, I know they say you shouldn't do this when you're a creator. You shouldn't be all over the place. You should have a focus, but I mean this with like the best intentions. It's really it's about the stuff that I like. So
yeah,
you're either along for the ride or you're not, and that's okay. By the time I wrap this thing up, whenever that is, you'll have a perfect understanding of what it is I actually care about.
Perfect. The Errorist Podcast. And what are you on? What platforms is it available?
Pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. It's Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, Anchor. I've
listened on Spotify. Right.
It's everywhere. So thank you so much, man.
No, it's been so great. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege speaking to you.
My pleasure.
And thanks for scaring the shit out of a generation.
Excellent. I'm glad we did our job.